Imagine being born to a chief but treated like garbage. Your father denies you. Your community mocks you. Other children throw stones and insults because your very existence is considered shameful. By age 6, you and your mother are exiled, cast out into the wilderness with nothing. No inheritance, no protection, no future. Now fast forward 20 years. That same rejected child commands a most feared military force in southern Africa. He transforms a scattered clan of 1,500 people into an empire of over 250,000. He revolutionizes warfare so completely that his tactics are still studied in military academies today. His name becomes synonymous with power, discipline, and unstoppable force. Shaka Zulu. But here's what they don't teach you about him. Before he conquered kingdoms, he couldn't even enter his own father's village. Before armies feared his name, his own people laughed at him. Before he changed history, he was nothing more than an unwanted mistake that refused to disappear. This isn't a story about someone destined for greatness. This is a story about what happens when rejection becomes fuel, when exile becomes education, when being pushed outside the circle forces you to build your own. And it starts in the most painful place possible. Welcome to HistoryMaker Stories. This channel exists to tell the unfiltered truth about history's most transformative leaders. We don't romanticize. We don't skip the brutal middle chapters. We don't pretend power came easily, because the real lessons live in the years of rejection, the decades spent building in isolation, the pain that either destroys you or forges you into something unbreakable. If you're here for substance, you're in the right place. Let's begin with a birth that nobody celebrated. Born unwanted, the curse of illegitimacy. Around 1787, in the rolling hills of what is now KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, a child was born who should never have existed. His name was Shaka. His father, Senzangakona, was chief of the Zulu clan, a relatively small and politically insignificant group at the time. His mother, Nondi, was from the neighboring Langeni clan. Their relationship violated protocol. According to custom, their intimacy before proper marriage negotiations was forbidden. When Nondi became pregnant, the Zulu elders were informed. They responded with contempt. It's not pregnancy, they claimed. It's just Shaka, an intestinal beetle believed to cause menstrual irregularities. That insult became his name. Shaka, literally the beetle. A name that meant, you are not real, you are a problem, you are something to be dismissed. When Shaka was born, Senzangakona was forced to acknowledge paternity. But acknowledgement is not acceptance. Nondi was never properly integrated as a wife. She was tolerated, not respected. And Shaka grew up in an environment where every day reminded him he didn't belong. Other children were cruel in the way only children can be. They mocked his mother. They called him bastard. They excluded him from games and rituals. Adults were worse. They blamed Nondi for disrupting social order. They treated Shaka as a living reminder of shame. By the time he was 6 years old, the situation had become unbearable. Senzangakona sent Nondi and Shaka away. Not temporarily, permanently. Mother and son were exiled back to the Langeni people. Homeless, disgraced, abandoned, exile, the education nobody planned. Returning to the Langeni should have been a refuge. It wasn't. Nondi's own people resented her return. She had left, gotten involved with a chief, and come back with a child born out of protocol. She was a burden. Shaka was a reminder of her failure. They were given shelter, barely. They were fed, reluctantly. They were ignored, constantly. Shaka spent his childhood on the edges, watching, learning, enduring. He herded cattle, a job given to boys with no status. He worked in fields. He survived on the scraps of belonging. But something critical was happening during these years. Rejection was teaching him to observe. He noticed who had power and why. He saw how respect was earned through strength, decisiveness, and control. He watched how fear and loyalty were two sides of the same blade. Most importantly, he learned that traditional belonging was conditional. If you were born wrong, you could never earn it back. If you were excluded once, you stayed excluded, unless you changed the rules entirely. Shaka grew tall, eventually reaching over 6 feet, towering in an era when most men were significantly shorter. He was lean, strong, and increasingly dangerous, not because he wanted violence, because he understood that power was the only language that silenced mockery. By his teenage years, Shaka had become someone people no longer laughed at. They avoided him instead, and that was progress. The Mthethwa years, learning from a master. Around 1803, Shaka and his mother moved again, this time to the Mthethwa clan, led by a paramount chief named Dingiswayo. This move changed everything. Dingiswayo was different from other chiefs. He didn't just rule, he thought strategically. He didn't just command warriors, he understood the psychology of power. He was building a coalition, consolidating smaller clans under his protection, creating a regional network of alliances. And he had a regiment system where young men trained together as warriors. Shaka joined the system. Finally, for the first time in his life, he found structure, discipline, purpose, a place where performance mattered more than lineage. And Shaka performed exceptionally, but not in the way others did. Most warriors focus on individual glory. They wanted to be seen throwing spears of farthest. They wanted praise for single acts of bravery. Shaka focused on effectiveness. He studied how battles were actually won and lost. He noticed that traditional Zulu warfare was inefficient. Warriors threw long spears from a distance, then often retreated. Armies were loose formations, easily scattered. Discipline collapsed under pressure. Battles dragged on. Casualties were inconsistent. Victory was often luck. Shaka saw all of this clearly because he wasn't invested in tradition. He had no ancestors to honor through ritual combat. He had no lineage that required him to fight the proper way. He was free to think differently. So he did. He began experimenting. He ran barefoot across thorns and rocky terrain, conditioning his feet until they were tougher than leather sandals. He trained with a short stabbing spear and ikla that he designed himself. Instead of throwing and retreating, he practiced closing distance rapidly and fighting in tight formation. He drilled endlessly on maintaining shield discipline, moving as a unit, creating an impenetrable wall. He became obsessed with endurance, speed, and psychological dominance. His fellow warriors thought he was strange. Dingiswayo saw potential. Under Dingiswayo's command, Shaka rose quickly, not because he was liked, because he was undeniable. He fought with controlled ferocity. He led by example. He never broke formation. And slowly, others began to imitate him. The philosophy of the outcast turning pain into principle. During his years with the Mthethwa, Shaka developed something more important than fighting skills. He developed a philosophy, born from rejection, refined through observation, weaponized through discipline. Here's what rejection taught him. Belonging is conditional unless you create it yourself. If you can't earn acceptance within existing structures, build new structures. If you're excluded from traditional power, redefine what power means. Tradition is just collective habit. The way things have always been done is not sacred, it's simply unexamined. And unexamined systems are vulnerable to someone willing to think clearly. Fear and loyalty are engineered. People don't follow you because they like you. They follow you because they trust your competence and fear the consequences of disloyalty. Discipline beats talent. Individual warriors might be brave, but a disciplined unit will destroy talented individuals every single time. These weren't abstract ideas. They were survival tools forged through years of being unwanted. And soon, he would get the chance to test them. The death of Dingiswayo chaos as opportunity. In 1816, everything changed. Dingiswayo was killed in battle against a rival chief named Zwide. The Mthethwa coalition fractured. Clans scattered. Alliances dissolved. Chaos spread across the region. And back in Zulu territory, Shaka's father, Senzenga Kona, died. The chieftainship should have passed to one of Senzenga Kona's legitimate sons. But Dingiswayo, before his death, had seen something in Shaka. He had supported Shaka's claim to Zulu leadership. With Dingiswayo's backing, and with the military reputation Shaka had built, Shaka returned home, not as the exiled bastard, as the A. Imagine that moment, returning to the place that expelled you, walking into the village that mocked you, facing the people who told you that you didn't belong, and claiming the throne they said you'd never touch. Shaka didn't ask for acceptance. He took command. The transformation, rebuilding a nation from zero. When Shaka became chief in 1816, the Zulu clan was insignificant. Fewer than 1,500 people. No wealth, no military reputation. no regional influence. Within a decade, Shaka transformed them into a kingdom of over 250,000 people. How? By rejecting everything traditional Zulu society had taught him. Military reformation. Shaka immediately reformed Zulu warfare. He replaced long throwing spears with the ikla, a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear. He introduced a large cowhide shield, used both defensively and offensively. He organized warriors into regiments based on age, called Amabutho. These weren't just military units, they were total social institutions. Warriors lived together, trained together, fought together. Marriage was forbidden until a regiment was officially discharged from service, sometimes decades later. This created absolute loyalty. Your identity was your regiment. Your family was your unit. Your purpose was Shaka's command. Tactical innovation. Shaka invented the buffalo horn formation. The main force, the chest, engaged the enemy head-on. Two flanking forces, the horns, encircled from the sides. A reserve force, the loins, waited behind, backs turned to avoid premature engagement. It was devastatingly effective. Enemies found themselves surrounded, compressed, and slaughtered. Psychological warfare. Shaka understood fear. He made sure defeated enemies who survived spread stories of Zulu invincibility. He used brutal displays of power to break morale before battles even began. He demanded absolute discipline from his warriors. Cowardice was punishable by death. Hesitation was not tolerated. Retreat without orders meant execution. This wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. This was control, cultural restructuring. Shaka didn't just build an army. He rebuilt Zulu identity itself. He created a mythology of Zulu superiority. He absorbed conquered clans, integrating them fully into Zulu society. If you submitted to Shaka, you became Zulu. Your past didn't matter. Your lineage didn't matter. Only loyalty mattered. The rejected child built a kingdom where rejection didn't exist as long as you obeyed. The unification empire built on discipline. Between 1816 and 1828, Shaka waged a series of campaigns that reshaped southern Africa. One by one, neighboring clans fell. Some through conquest, some through diplomacy, most through a combination of overwhelming force and strategic brilliance. The Mthethwa, his old allies, were absolved. The Ndwandwe, who killed Dingiswayo, were crushed. The Quabe, the Thembu, dozens of others all integrated. The Zulu kingdom expanded at an astonishing rate. But here's what's critical to understand. Shaka didn't just conquer. He assimilated. Defeated clans weren't enslaved. They were incorporated. Warriors joined Zulu regiments. Chiefs swore loyalty and kept localized authority. Women married into Zulu families. Within a generation, people who had been enemies identified as Zulu. This was nation building on a scale rarely seen in pre-colonial Africa. And it worked because Shaka understood something profound. People don't fight hardest for land. They fight hardest for belonging. The outcast built a system where everyone could belong if they submitted completely. The cost of unresolved pain. But Shaka's story doesn't end in triumph. By the mid-1820s, his rule had become increasingly brutal. When his mother, Nondi, died in 1827, Shaka's grief was catastrophic. He ordered a year of mourning. No crops were planted. No milk was consumed. Couples found showing affection were executed. Thousands were killed in purges driven by paranoia and rage. Shaka's early pain had never healed. It had only been channeled. And when the one person who had stood by him through exile died, the foundation cracked. Power without reflection always carries a cost. Shaka grew paranoid. He saw threats everywhere. His demands became erratic. On September 22, 1828, Shaka was assassinated, stabbed by his half-brother's men who feared him and wanted his power. He was approximately 41 years old. He died violently, betrayed by family, just as he had been rejected by family in childhood. The cycle never broke. Shaka Zulu's story is not a clean heroic arc. It's the story of what happens when brilliance and trauma collide. He rose from nothing because rejection forced him to think differently. He built an empire because exile taught him that belonging must be created, not inherited. He revolutionized warfare because pain sharpened his mind into a weapon. But he also fell because unresolved suffering eventually consumes even the strongest leaders. Shaka proved that rejection can be fuel, that discipline beats tradition, that outcast can reshape the world. But he also proved that transformation without healing is incomplete. If you're overlooked right now, if you're outside the circle, if life rejected you before you were ready, you're not finished. You're in the chapter where the real work happens. But remember this: strength built on pain must eventually be paired with reflection. Otherwise, you win the kingdom but lose yourself. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to HistoryMaker Stories. We tell the full story of the rejection, the rise, and the cost. Drop a comment. What experience of rejection changed how you see the world? Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And remember, being pushed outside the circle might be the beginning of building your own. Keep building.